Kill House, Delrin bolt, Byrna kinetics, my spring setup, 1100 PSI. $500. $494. $494. Superbolt time. Hey guys, Sean, Leslie Liver Dummies. So today I wanted to compare the Kill House Delrin bolt, which I have got my best results on, so my highest velocity, against the TechT Superbolt. But first I'm just gonna show you basically how the factory system works. So this is your marker at rest. You pull the charge handle, so I've got no spring in it right now. This is the big ass heavy drive spring that I'm using. You can see it there. Been working very well. It doesn't grow tired like the factory drive spring, so I'm very happy with that. But, so your marker's at rest. You pull the charge handle. It comes back. I'll try and keep this in view here. You'll see the sear engage. You air your marker, it charges the chamber, and then when you pull the trigger and release this sear here, come on, the bolt travels forward, sorry, the hammer travels forward, striking the valve pin inside here. But you see how the bolt is moving in unison? So it's pushing your projectile into the barrel simultaneously. And then the timing's just right. The hammer strikes the valve pin like that. You see that final push there? Your projectile is perfectly loaded in the barrel. Air is released. It travels through this power tube out the front and down your barrel. The good thing with the Delrin bolt is it has a rear O-ring seal, which I've found seems to be most beneficial. It gets more of your air down the barrel instead of blowing back, kind of backwards out your power tube. So the Superbolt, and there's a reason why I didn't test this at first, and I don't know, I still could be an issue. In case anybody cares. This is made specifically, well, it says that it fits many Tippmann and Vulcan markers and BT markers. It is not aluminum. Like the fellow mentioned to me, you can see it is very highly polished. And it's not magnetic, so I can assume that it is stainless steel. One thing that's different that you would see is I've already replaced this front O-ring with a urethane HBA tank O-ring. The rubber O-rings that these come with just don't stand the test of time, so I just replace it right away. So yours would have a black O-ring. I've already replaced mine. The fellow that commented and said that he saw an increase, I imagine he did. So what did I do with that spring already? There it is. This is called an anti-chop bolt. So this spring fits in behind like this. And you can see the top has a slot cut in it. Whereas this one is a fixed hole. So the hammer and the bolt move in unison, no matter what, with this setup. With this setup, if your marker were just to encounter a chop, the rod, the linkage rod, and your hammer are going to move, and I believe they're going to fire actually. I don't know yet. It's gonna fire, but it's not gonna, your bolt's not gonna push the projectile correctly into the barrel, obviously, because you had a jam of some sort. So the way they get around this slot, or the way it functions, is they use this spring behind to actually push this bolt forward. So if it counters an obstacle, I'm trying to do this here like this without it shooting off. Projectile half loads, it counters an obstacle. The spring is the only thing pushing this bolt forward to properly load your round. That spring is really strong, might I add. Pull the trigger, nothing happens. The bolt just stays there. I believe air, again, I untested. I think it's still gonna fire, but the projectile is still gonna just be lodged right here. The reason why I didn't test this originally was, my thought was, if your projectile was just, you know, less lethal, we're shooting heavy stuff, that this may slow the timing of this whole system to a point where it's releasing air, or sorry, your bolt is kind of have your projectile right here and releasing air, as opposed to releasing air here when your projectile is here. That could cause all kinds of velocity spikes, reduced velocity. But here I am. I'm going to test it. I fully understand that this additional spring probably accounted for the other fellow's added velocity. So this additional spring is going to be pulling on your hammer, which is going to increase the strike time on your valve. Now I'm going to just reinstall it as you just saw me test it. This additional spring that's here may mess up my the settings I already have here. So my valve spring is set up for this drive spring. Now adding additional spring tension to this drive spring, and not in this manner, but it's going to be pulling on this, is going to increase the hammer time, or the valve pin strike time, and that may cause some auto fire. I may have to make some adjustments, but bottom line here is I wanted to see, is this going to help me, or am I going to have to start over again? I do like this hammer, or sorry, bolt. It's heavy, it's robust, and it's shiny. So I'll put all this back together and we shall test it out. Ball bearings inside. Nice big fat dry spring, you can see there now. I haven't come up with a solution for this back piece yet. This is something I had and I have no idea where it came from. It's some sort of floorboard screw, but it works very well to distribute the force of the end of the spring. All right. So there we have everything back in place, and you can kind of see now when I cock this bolt how this spring, when it goes to fire, is going to be trying to tug your dry spring harder against the valve. There we go. Sealer up, fire up. All back together. Look at that, shiny. I'll never see it when the port cover's on, but I always like to just test fire it on the bench here, make sure it actually cycles. She got some kick. Who's up for some trial by fire? So it's all back together. Byrna Kinetics, 2.9 grams, 14-inch line claw, TechT Superbolt, TechT light and hammer. Big heavy drive spring. 1100 PSI. Probably forgetting something, but 500 feet per second was the number to beat on my Delrin bolt. Now, before I even fire this, if there are malfunctions, now I have my current drive spring shimmed with ball bearings. This might be a perfect opportunity to remove those ball bearings, but that remains to be seen. Too much spring. I am going to remove all the shims in my hammer, and we'll try that again. Bottle pumped to 1100 PSI. Offending shims removed. Now these added preload to my heavy spring, which maybe have been too much with the addition of the Superbolt spring to overcome for the blowback. So I've reduced that preload. Now again, depending on what happens and how close I get to that 500 mark, which is my best at this point with this bolt, I may make some adjustments and try and use this bolt. I do like that it's metal, but again, gotta find that out first. I didn't put the marker all together this time, although I always recommend at least set it up with your barrel set up when you're test firing. You don't have to put all the furniture back on because it can be tiresome when you're opening and closing this thing a zillion times. Byrna Kinetics. To a 38. Still too much. Still too much. It didn't recock, but it didn't just dump all the air, which is a good thing. To 48. Adjustments will be made. Okay guys, frustration is starting to set in, but the Superbolt is not working with my setup. It was never intended to be used with these big drive springs and such, but here's what I think's going on. So I did tune this down. I'm not going to show you because it's boring. I tuned down the drive spring so that this marker functioned properly, and the best I could muster was 282 feet per second. As soon as I went up one more drive spring, it started to stutter. And here's what I think's happening. Because these two pieces are not directly linked, when the bolt goes forward and fires, because I'm firing high pressure for less lethal, this bolt stutters back on its own because it's not linked directly to the hammer. It can slide on that slot there. And that in turn, that stutter that's happening is normally compression that's happening in the barrel, and that helps reset the hammer with my super strong drive spring. So with this drive spring in place, the bolt compressing the air in the barrel is not helping reset the hammer. It's just doing its own thing independently here. But gonna go way out on left field here. I'm gonna put back my heavier drive spring. So this is the one that I tuned down with. I'm not gonna put the shims in. And I'm gonna try something crazy. And that is I'm gonna put the Delrin bolt back in, but I'm gonna use the TechT spring. I don't know if this is gonna work or not. It may not compress enough. No, it looks like it will. I don't know. This is a Frankenstein build now. So we'll hook that in there, get that in there. We're gonna do that. And just see what it does. Because if it fires like this, essentially what that tells me is I'm correct. And this bolt is stuttering on its own, and that's affecting the whole timing of this system. Now, could I still use this? I mean, maybe I can bung up that slot, and because I mean, this bolt is super nice. But let's just see if this thing will fire. Not gonna work. So that spring there is preventing the sear from locking, unfortunately. Okay, well, I do have a heavier, so I bought a longer dry spring that I could cut down instead of using shim. So I'm gonna install that, and that's how we're gonna finish the video off. For now, Superbolt's dead to me. It's intended to work more with sort of a factory setup than the concoction I got here now. Like I said, maybe I can plug up that slot and use it as a regular fixed bolt. We'll see. In the meantime, I've just reverted back to, this is a spring size that I have been using in my light and hammer. But instead of shimming this spring with a ball bearing, this time I purchased the same spring, but in a 300 millimeter length. So it was a really long one. I've already cut it down. I stuffed it in the marker. And we're back, baby. Byrna Kinetics. 100 PSI. 120 millimeters is what I cut that spring to. 120 millimeters length. Oh! Get that ball out of there. Forgot to air it up. That's better. $4.94. $4.98. You get the idea. Stick to what works. Whoa. Don't shoot your window out.